What is going to be Kyle Murray from FTN Daily back again with the PrizePicks Prop Show, bringing some of my favorite NFL plays for this week. Got a nice little slate on our hands, despite a handful of teams being on bye. It's one of the bigger bye weeks of the season, but still tons of great games, a lot of potential playoff implications in this week, so tons to talk about. And I have 5 of my favorite props, including a free square, which not by my standards there. It's not just one of my favorite plays. It is genuinely a free square. It's Justin Herbert over half a passing yard. We'll get more into that when we get to the picks. Before we do, if you're a new user at PrizePicks, head over there, use code FTN, get yourself a 100% match up to $100. Get that bankroll started in a great way there. And before we get into my picks, let me know who some of your favorite picks are over on PrizePicks for this week's NFL action in the comments below. Curious to see where you guys are going. Now, let's get into my picks. Like I mentioned, first pick is going to be a free square. I guess I'll take credit for it. Justin Herbert over half a passing yard. This is going to be available up until that game ticks off, so make sure you are getting that bet in there. You're only gonna be able to place it once. I think it's $20 or $25 max, but still make sure in one of your entries you're getting this prop or this play involved. It can make a 6-leg into a 5-leg, etc. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. But it's a free square that you do not want to miss. But now for my 5 picks here. Pick number 1, Derrick Henry over 82.5 rushing yards. It's been kind of a rough stretch the last 2 games here for Derrick Henry. He's been held under 40 rushing yards. Not really like the typical Derrick Henry that we've come to kind of love and expect, but it's a good bounce back spot for him here in a spot against the Jacksonville Jaguars where they're favorited here by about 3.5, 4 points depending on where you look. But just the fact that we can potentially see Tennessee be back in a game script where they can control the ball, hand the ball off to Derrick Henry as much as they possibly can. I think this is a good spot here for Derrick Henry to regain that workhorse role, get all the volume, and then therefore rack up those yards. And I think the line's just obviously low. It's been brought down by a couple of bad performances. My model has him for over 104 yards on the ground this week. So I like Derrick Henry quite a bit here this week. Pick number 2, going to stay with the running back on the ground, another guy who's kind of been up and down the last few weeks, but Saquon Barkley over 70.5 rushing yards. This is a really when we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, I know a lot of people give them a lot of respect, and I think rightfully so. But when we talk about them, we need to be a little bit more, clear on some of their strengths and weaknesses. A lot of their significant strengths have come defending the pass rather than the run, and a lot of times they've been forcing teams into scenarios where they have to pass because they've been doing so well on the offensive end. And that could happen here, potentially. But I think the key identity of this New York Giants team is Saquon Barkley and getting him involved on the ground. Obviously, we've seen some up and down performances from him and the team in general. And I think as he goes, the team goes as well. So in this divisional game, this game with lots of playoff implications, I think that they're going to rely on their star running back here. I mean, he's been bad. He's had 1 game over 70 yards over the last 5. It was for 152 against Houston. Outside of that, he has been pretty bad. There's been a couple of games where he's been forced out of game scripts that benefit the ground. But I think this is a spot to get back to it here for Saquon Barkley. But the biggest thing here is, like I mentioned, that Giants team is going to look to run the ball. And it's just a run funnel defense for Philadelphia, who ranks 2nd against the pass and 23rd against the run. So I think it just makes a ton of sense to get Saquon involved early and often on the ground. And, my model has him for right around 82 rushing yards this week. So a little edge there over the 70.5 line. But pick number 3 is going to be Miles Sanders, staying in that same game. We're taking the over on 62.5 rushing yards. Another guy where it's been kind of up and down. Like, we're sort of buying low on some of these guys here. But this is a really good matchup here for Miles Sanders. This New York team, although they've had some success in terms of limiting scoring on the defensive end, a lot of their efficiency numbers really have not been strong, especially against the ground, right? They're allowing over 5.1 yards per carry, nearly 120 rushing yards to opposing running backs per game. They're just really doing a good job at limiting scoring, but obviously that's not going to matter here a ton with Miles Sanders because we're strictly betting on the yards here. But the thing here is with this Giants team, projected to lose or implied to lose by nearly a touchdown here per Vegas odds. That should be, leaving Miles Sanders in a good standing here to continue to kind of be involved in the ground game. But that's pick number 3. On to pick number 4. We're going to go to back-to-back wide receivers to close it out. First one, Amon-Ra St. Brown, over 80.5 receiving yards. Really can't say enough about how good this guy has been as of late. Obviously, early on in the season, he dealt with that ankle injury where he kind of tried to return, was limited, and he's been, up and down. But over the past 4 or 5 weeks, he's been fantastic. In his last 4 games, he's gone over 114 yards 3 times. This line at 80.5, I think, is just simply too low. My model has him near 95. It's a great matchup, and they're going to need to throw the ball and throw it well in order to win this game. Another game with divisional and playoff implications. Who would have thought that the Detroit Lions would, be favorites against the Minnesota Vikings here late on in the season after the Vikings have racked up, I believe, 9 or 10 wins. So it's been a pretty significant ride here for both the Vikings and the Lions, but in this spot here for Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're going against a team in the Vikings whose secondary has been pretty bad all year long. They rank 24th in pass DVOA. They're allowing 203 receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers, which is worst amongst any team playing on Sunday. Nearly 15 catches, over 9 yards per target, and a 68% catch rate. All 4 of those stats that I just mentioned, all are worst amongst any team playing on Sunday. So it's a great spot here for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I like him to go over 80.5 receiving yards. Now, finally, I have the shirt on. Not sure if you guys can tell, but it's a CeeDee Lamb shirt. We're taking over CeeDee Lamb, 69.5 receiving yards. Great matchup here against Houston. A little concerning based on the potential game script. My model has him for nearly 80 yards on the day. It's just a really good spot here for CeeDee Lamb, and obviously we know that he has this role locked up, and I do think that we see a little bit of a decreased line here due to the fact that the blowout is really a significant potential. Like a lot of times I say that you don't want to necessarily, write it up as it's going to happen in terms of these blowouts at times, but it's an 18-point spread. That's the biggest spread that we've seen all year long. It's one of the biggest that I can remember in recent years. So it is something to really not only consider, but sort of factor in at times here. And that is being factored into my model, taking some pass attempts away from the Cowboys, etc. And even with all of that being accounted for, still well over 70, nearly 80 receiving yards projected on the day. He's gone over 71 receiving yards in 4 of his last 5. Like I mentioned, really good matchup here against this Houston team who's kind of just been struggling in general on the defensive side, but they rank 19th in pass DVOA so far this season. So those are the 5 picks. Just to recap, obviously we have the Justin Herbert free square. Make sure you're taking full advantage of that, over half a passing yard. And then my 5 picks: Derrick Henry over 82.5 rushing yards, Saquon Barkley over 70.5 rushing yards, Miles Sanders over 62.5 rushing yards, and closing out with 2 receiver props: Amon-Ra St. Brown over 80.5 receiving yards, and lastly CeeDee Lamb over 69.5 receiving yards. So those are my picks. Hopefully you all have a great week. Obviously we're kind of winding down the NFL season. A lot of intense fantasy and betting stuff going on right now with all the playoff implications, not only in real life football, but in fantasy football as well. This is the last week for the first round of the Underdog Best Ball tournament if you're playing over there. So lots of stuff going on this week for fantasy football. So hopefully you guys have a great one. Lots of success. Again, appreciate your support on these videos and on the channel. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with not only PrizePicks NFL videos, but NBA, all that other stuff, as well as other content on the channel, betting, DFS, fantasy, whatever you guys are looking for. We have you covered at FTN Network. So we appreciate your support. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, good luck, everybody.